we are on record now. So, yeah. What do we got, Sasha?
Get my notes here.
So there's really two sections of what we read, which is the general question, is metaphysics possible at all? And then how is pure mathematics possible? And I think the majority of the time we're going to spend having to pick things apart is going to be in the second part. Um, but yeah. So I kind of want to jump through the first part.
Wherever you want to start.
Um, uh, so did you get any? So I mean, the main thing out of the first part, the general question, is metaphysics possible at all? Is that he's gonna go. He's gonna present his method of. His method, and then he's gonna bring up where to start from. So his method is we must rely on something already known to be dependable, from which we can go forward and ascend to the sources which are not yet known, and whose discovery not only will explain what is already known, but will also exhibit an area with many cognitions. And then he says that the something or other that we already know says what we're interested in is pure a priori synthetic
Our intuitions.
So our intuition. So what we know is a synthetic. Yes, intuitions is the I guess the first leap. But I guess the ground on that we start on is pure mathematics, because that is more or less an undisputed synthetic a priori realm, which is fair. Fair to say, I think. I mean, I've heard whatever. There are arguments against whether pure math is or is not, but I generally agree with that. Um, and then so he says both pure math and pure natural science, which I don't know what the fuck he's talking about with pure natural science, but I guess we'll get to that.
Yep.
Because natural science, as far as I understand, is very experienced. That's the point of it. So I don't know. Yeah, and yeah, I don't know. There was something that was very peculiar to me, well, personally, because when I was taught and when I kind of read the Critique of Pure Reason, this movement from what is already known and then moving up to how it's possible, I was thought was supposed to be, uh, I guess specific. Well, was something that happened generally speaking in the Critique of Pure Reason, but the way that he's talking about that this is his method of moving forward, and here, which is not how they do in the Critique of Pure Reason, it's just, I don't know, not exactly what I remember, but maybe I didn't quite grasp what was going on when I learned before. So, but now I know.
Uh,
Uh,
yeah. All right.
you've
Um,
mm-hmm.
so he seems so there's a big contradiction I find in this section, just in his tone. Which is he's both critiquing uh everyone for not being, I guess, introspective, or he talks about the foam, right, rising to the top.
Uh-huh.
Everyone thinks they know what they're doing or knows that they've divided the smallest atom, but he speaks with a lot of ego, as if he has solved it all, which kind of flies in the face of what he's talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, he is very confident. I mean, I think the problem is that it is very profound, the realm of things that he thought of, but then he moved from it being profound to being I am totally right and I have the answer and everybody else is stupid, which is also just, well, it's a habit that philosophers have. But yes, it is ironic. He's like, everybody else was wrong.
And he seems to really, and this is later though, but have a huge problem with anyone who calls him idealist. He has he is so upset that people think he's an idealist.
Oh yeah.
Just because he's saying, it's kind of like if I were to say, well, John, it's not that I don't believe in God. It's that I'm not saying I do. I don't fucking believe in him. Just saying that there'd be like a 1% chance. But like, fuck you for thinking. It's like, hey, all right, chill, bro. I just asked. But I'm guessing back then in contemporary time, the idealist was very looked down upon. It sounds like. In the Humean fucking era, or whoever's fucking.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can't quite. So I haven't. I'm not super familiar with who else was around in his time. The only person that's relevant before Kant or historically to Kant that is, I guess, as close as I can get to him periodically is Hume, who's actually not. He's like, I want to say, he wrote his treatise 30 years before this came out. Treatise on Human Nature. Oh, it wasn't so bad. 1739. Okay, so 40 plus 42 years. But yeah, there's, I guess, the two Mendelssohn. He's one dude that's rather very relevant.
Can I give what I think? So this whole intuition to concepts to the POV to the object to a priori versus what is it, posteriori? If I'm gonna, all of my thoughts about this section are very disparate. I'm gonna try to link them together, but then I want you to either completely critique it or build it from your own framework. But from what I am gathering is that, and I'm really fucking like, it was very hard to wrap my brain around, but what I think he's saying in the first section here, or the section about that, is that, and I'm going to speak as if I'm him. I'm not saying that everything is in the mind, but the mind presents an image, or like when Russell would say, an aberration, right? And that image is, as far as we know, reality. Now, there may be a difference between reality and what we see as reality, but that all happens in the mind. We cannot know that the mind is giving us a false reality, but we can, through third parties, check that reality is different from our minds. Is that kind of... He's laying pieces of that out. Is that right?
Yes, that's pretty much it, yeah.
It was really hard to kind of... It wasn't until he says... concepts from the point of view, how can an intuition of an object, intuition that precedes an object, known from experience itself is nothing but a continual joining together of perceptions, and then the connection between one concept and another. That whole section, prior knowledge of synthetic propositions possible. Sorry. Anyways, but yeah, you get it.
For both all of what we read today, yes, that's a large part of.
Space is not independent of the mind. That precedes it. We cannot misinterpret appearance of the real world, but can't misinterpret that appearance, space and time are like spreadsheets. And then there's a Bertrand Russell quote. But yeah, that's what sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So, yeah. So you said something in there about like what we experience. Well, so we don't want to say that all of reality is made up of thinkers and thoughts. Um, but and that's what idealism, in its
Right.
kind of like full mode is, or in its like traditional sense before Kant showed up. But I
He's saying
guess
there's something in reality that we're mapping onto in our mind. It's not, there's not two independent things, reality, or it's not completely in the mind, but what we see is completely of the mind.
yes,
But that
yes.
mind image is being mapped on from reality. So instead of this binary, is it mind, is it real world, it's this it's this intermediary that is communicating with the real world, and when that communication comes back as an image in our head or behind our eyeballs, right?
Hmm.
Obviously, there can be we can't we have to take that at face value. So whatever we are given in that relaying of information in an image to our brain, when I look at something,
Hmm.
that image, I cannot. What does he say? I cannot misinterpret appearance, right?
Oh yeah.
But I can misinterpret the appearance of the real world, but I can't misinterpret the appearance of what's in my mind.
Well, okay. So so that had to do with I think that had to do with the difference between like like dreams and regular experience, where I guess we would say what really is going on is an experience. So, what's really going on is an experience. Um, yeah. So we don't have any illusion in terms of our sensibility. Like I'm never gonna, uh, like I'm not. I don't have it's not an illusion that I'm seeing a mammoth riding. Well, it's not an illusion that I'm seeing a gray blob, and then on top of that, or not a gray blob, a brown blob, and on top of that, a purple blob, and then in my concept, I'm imagining that there's or dreaming that there's a wizard riding a mammoth. Um, I didn't the this the sensation that I'm having that I see that I end up interpreting as a wizard riding a dragon or a mammoth. The the illusion part happens is when you try to start taking your sensations and fitting them in with the rest of your concepts. And if I now say, oh well, this is like this, and fitting it in with the rest of all of your thoughts. So you go, oh, this is a wizard riding a mammoth, and well, I could go tell Joe about this wizard riding a mammoth, and we could both come back and we could kick the mammoth and we could yell at the wizard, and the mammoth would get mad and the wizard would get mad. And if I infer all that from just simply believing that like seeing that there's a wizard riding a mammoth in front of me, then I guess I probably have a or yeah. So if I think that and then I go and try to do those things and none of those things happen because it's a dream and everything turned into jaguars or something, and I still go on believing that the wizard riding a mammoth was a real object, then that's where the illusion lies, which is that I didn't really fit in the sensation with the rest of my concepts effectively, and so I made a false inference thinking that that was a person, but it was never an illusion that I saw the purple blob on top of a brown blob. Whereas similarly, like with well, on the other hand, then you have like I have a silver shiny thing riding on a brown shiny thing, which is a knight on a horse or something, or a dude wearing armor riding a horse. And then I can go like, well, if I go and kick the horse, and I go and kick and I yell at the knight, and then I do go kick the horse, and it doesn't turn into a jaguar, and it, kind of like brays back at me like I've seen in other blobs that are brown of this shape. Um, and then the guy does yell at me like when I yell at other people. Um, so it's that the difference between the like where illusion comes in isn't from the sensations, but from the fitting together of the sensations into our concepts. Uh, Now I know that was only part of what you were asking about. I know that's only part of what you're asking about. I don't know if you're talking right now and and the sound thing isn't working. that's kind of what it looks like. And I know that was only part of what you asked about, but now that I kind of went down that rabbit hole, I don't remember what the original question was. Oh no. He's resetting his sound.
All right. I was able to hear everything you said until I left.
I stopped talking after you left.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. Yeah. So all that makes sense, right? Fuck. And that like I tried interrupting you like 3 times because I had like thoughts, and I was like, oh, he's just gonna plow over me.
No, I couldn't hear
Dude,
anything
I'm
you were
getting
saying.
so triggered. I don't know what's going on. But yeah, so everything you said made sense, and it there were multiple times I wanted to jump in,
Mm-hmm.
and it's gone now.
Okay. So you said something about like so we're talking about the difference between idealism in the traditional sense where there are only thinkers and thoughts, and then you have Kant who goes there's thinkers and thoughts and things. Uh, and,
Right.
yeah, and so the objects of our experience, as far as Kant's talking about, are just thoughts. Uh, and that and then the important I guess kind of what he I don't exactly know why he exactly calls himself an idealist in any sense of the term other than that just he decided to also turn space and time away from being things in themselves and brought them over to the side of thoughts. Um, and then that's the only. I mean, I think it was probably greatly confusing for him to call himself an idealist. Uh, because then I think people just go, well, then you think everything is just in your head. Um, Although, which clearly means that nobody read the section of his book in the Critique of Heroism called "The Refutation of Idealism." If you're
Okay. You're hold on. You're cutting in and out.
hello, maybe I'll try talking closer. You kind of, yeah, you just kind of sprang out of the audio.
All right. I think I was on a dedicated IP. Hopefully, we're better now. But I heard everything you said. Yeah. I'm looking at the history now of idealism to see if like there was a turning point or a stigma. It seemed like back then.
Yeah, I mean there was a constant battle, uh, between like idealists and materialists. I don't know if there was a stigma. I mean, anybody who was a materialist would have, tried to shit on Kant and quickly calling him an idealist because, well, Kant called himself an idealist, even though it was caveated.
Yeah, the refutation of idealism.
Mm-hmm.
Descartes. Oh yeah, he goes in Descartes, and I meant to fucking dig further into that. He throws shade at sophists, and um, Descartes.
Yep, Descartes, but more so Berkeley. He really doesn't. He thinks is a bit of a sham.
Deny the existence of the corporeal world because it could never prove satisfactorily. Doubting the existence of things constitutes idealism in the ordinary sense, but the doctrine I have labeled as idealism, in the phrase transcendental idealism, doesn't concern the existence of things, since it never entered my head to doubt that they exist. Rather, it concerns the sensory representation of those things, especially of space and time.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was a good.
Mm-hmm.
The word transcendental was meant to guard against the misconception. Um, Transcendental. Well,
So a very I think a very fascinating example of I guess the difference between the intuitions of space and time and the concept of space and time, which he only really brushed up upon, and he eventually, I'm imagining he's actually going to face them directly. It comes in when you have, and it comes in when, well, it shows up when he was talking about the difference between dreams and experience, or like I guess if you want to call it objective experience, which was the star, or like planets or stars in the sky that are planets, and the sensations that we get are that, oh well, I mean, I don't know enough astronomy, but basically like the planets in the sky are moving whatever east, and then at some point they start moving west, and then they go back to going east. People are like, what the fuck's going on there? They must be doing a bunch of weird things. They must be
talk to the pyramid guys. They know stuff.
Yes, they do know stuff. They have free infinite wireless electricity.
5G.
Yes. Which is that so in that example, what was happening is that, I guess, pre-Copernican astronomers basically were fitting their sensations into, they were misunderstanding the sensations, and I guess conceiving of the sensations incorrectly, whereas Copernicus.
What do you mean when you say that?
Well, what they were trying
I'm following, but I'm just curious
Yeah.
if you can kind of embellish on it.
Oh yeah, so the pre-Copernican people were trying to put Earth at the center, and then what they ended up doing, they had a bunch of like weird diagrams where like the
Oh yeah. I thought you were talking about something else. In the real world, not space, which is the real world, but that I understand. The center of the universe verse.
yeah. So pre-Copernican people would look at the stars in the sky, and they would receive sensations, and then they would try to get those sensations and fit and understand, and they would try to understand them, right? Fit them into their concepts, apply the concepts, fit them into the the relationships that these sensations or these representations have with all the other representations of things that they have. And they were trying to do it by having, like, they would have like, so imagine like in a perfect, the Earth is at the center, and then you had planets going in perfect circles around it. But then they were trying to explain like retrograde, I guess is what it's called, when the planets appear to go backwards. And so the way that they explained that was that, like, well, so imagine like the point at which we previously all thought that the planets were going on, that was actually the center of another circle, and on that circle the planet was actually rotating, and then it was kind of like moving around in a circle. So imagine like a spinning top going in a circle, and then the planet was on the edge of the spinning top, and it would be going in a circle in a circle. Does that make any sense?
Well, yeah, like I understand what you're getting at. The planet's rotations plus the orbit plus perspective.
Yes, I guess. Okay.
If you're trying to make an example outside of that, then amend what I said to fix it. Or
okay, I don't think I have to draw this. Yeah, no, you get what I'm saying. But basically, they saw sensations and they conceived of them poorly, and then Copernicus decided to switch things around, and then he made it, I guess, less illusory. If you want to, he put it into a better way. It made it look nicer. So, and so yeah, so it's just it's yeah, well yeah, that's just the difference between our like, it's just hinting towards the concept of space and time versus the intuitions that are space and time. That's all I really wanted to say.
Wait, say that last part again.
The difference between, I guess, those two conceptions of this planetary motion with respect to sensory input, kind of shows the difference between the intuitions of space and time and the concepts of space and time. or
So you're
hints.
making an analogy between when we thought we were the center of the universe versus the actual.
Yeah.
Um, so in that case, our perspective or what we see as the concept definitions or how those concepts come to be the way they are,
Mhm.
that we're at the center of the universe. Our sensories were not lying to us, but the deductions we're making or
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
inductions were would that be no, that'd be deductions, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We're taking our data.
Well,
um
we're trying to do deduction. It's kind of a
it's a weird way to use the word deducted logic,
it's
but
peculiar. We could go down this rabbit hole. Um, I mean, because induction would be more like saying like, oh, over the last year I saw the planets do this, and so then over the next year I will see it do this, or over the last 10 years I saw the planets do this, so over the next 10 years it'll do this. Um, Whereas I guess they were trying to come up with well, I guess they were trying to come up with like a model that would hold true for all time, you know. So I guess in a way it was induction, but like kind of what they were doing was trying to discern the pattern, and then from the pattern, I guess you would do it. I mean, basically, you would prove like the actual model. I don't think was really constructed so much out of induction as it would be supported by induction, right? Like somebody could come up with a model. I could just come up with a nonsense model of the planetary motion where it's a bunch of spaghetti and be like, yeah, I thought about it, but then we can basically prove its truth or falsity, you know, by induction, because I go, oh, in my model, 3 days from now the planet's going to look like this, and then 3 days from now it doesn't look like that. So we go, fuck that model.
yeah,
But
it's a new theory.
how I
It's definitely induction. I
well
was
that
using the word wrong.
well no, you weren't using it wrong. It's just that how you, I guess, prove it is sort of inductive, but the way that you conceive it is a little, whether it's induction or deduction. I'm not totally certain. Uh, Modeling
And
is
then there's
weird.
abduction.
Yes, abduction. Which I'm gonna just say it so I can recall it, so I can practice recalling it. So deduction.
Yeah, no. It would not be deductives because we had no data. Because the simple example, this I trust this because they're using former philosophy that we're familiar with. All swans are white. Daisy is a swan, therefore Daisy is white. That would be deduction. So we're taking all swans are white and mapping that on,
Mm-hmm.
right? Induction is Daisy is a swan and white. Danny is a swan and white. Dante is a swan and white. Therefore, all swans are white. Right. So we're coming up with a theory based on not a statement of fact, but here are three independent pieces of data. So we're going to make a theory or hypothesis based on that data, not all swan, because deduction would be all swans are white. That is a statement of fact versus swan A is white, swan B is white, swan C is white. Therefore, all swans are white, but we don't have all the swans, and they may not even be swans. We only see them in binoculars across the pond, right, or whatever.
Well, the I guess the peculiar thing about doing so, we don't just so the peculiar thing about this like at least the planetary motion is that the way that they come up with the model. I mean, I guess you're not looking at the next one, because what you do is, like, I guess what I imagine you do is you look at all the data points that you had and you go, what describes what we know to have fit together the best. And that's like so you are looking at what you already know, and you're not actually saying anything yet about.
Well, okay. Well, if we abstract everything we say is something that we know, or the way you're using it,
There's a
right? Every piece of information we're using to section off new theories would always include previous data. I don't think that's a.
Well, I mean, I guess so. Yeah, you're right. It's induction. Yeah, because you go, well, you know, Bill was a white swan and Jimbo was a white swan. Well, what made all these swans be white? Well, it's just that all swans are white.
Right.
Is the
We're creating a theory versus using a theory and testing.
well,
Test.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Because the deduction would be stars rotate or planets rotate around the sun. And we are a planet, therefore we rotate around the sun.
Yeah.
Induction would be we are on a round thing. There we rotate, and stars above us move left and right. Therefore, they rotate around us.
Mm-hmm.
That would be, and even the other way around. We're a planet.
Wait. Say that one again about the like, because I could see that like inductively, like I go, well, I'm not moving left and right. I just see other things moving left and right in the sky. So,
Well, yeah, that was a retarded example, right? Obviously, I would say that I could amend that with the stars in the sky wiggle over 12-month periods. Therefore, they wiggle around us in 12-month periods.
I guess we could say that like deduction has to happen within a model or things of inside of
Yes.
a set of things that are already known.
That's what I'm saying here.
But
Yeah, I've been working off of a little.
If we're trying to discern, if we're trying to discern something new, it would be induction. Although now I want to say what abduction is, which is I wanted to iterate over these. So the example that I had,
All swans are white. Daisy is white. Therefore, Daisy is a swan. That would be abduction.
Yeah.
Here, I'll just
I think so.
I'll put this in general. God, I don't know what's up with my internet today.
Yeah, that's something I'd want to. Yeah. Anyway.
There it is.
Regardless of whether it's induction or deduction, which yeah, well, to some degree, it's the well, arguably what the scientists are doing are actually abduction and not induction. Because they're trying to find
The scientists back then.
Yeah, they were doing abduction. Although I don't think they would have called it that. Because
well, obviously they wouldn't call it that. But
yeah.
How would they? Because they speak German. If we're gonna be smartasses.
Right. Well, like I don't think they had the concept of abduction.
Yeah, of course.
Whether it was in German or not. But I guess it's supposed to be the theory. Well, abduction is, put in other words, is the movement or the inference to the best possible explanation.
I don't think that's right.
Whereas making
I know that.
Well, that's what it's. I mean, what you're saying that's. Not
I know what you're talking about. I know that definition.
Mm-hmm.
And through abduction, I'm saying that I don't think that's the definition.
It's described that way. I mean, so the also so the difference between like the induction. So the induction is making a generalized claim, but abduction is making a claim about one thing. I'm making a claim.
I don't think that's significant.
I think it is. So when I was, at least the guy who came up with it, which is Charles Pierce, came up with this, and he had you have a rule, a case, and a result. Well, at least in a deduction. So we had
Well, hold on. I'm sorry. You posited a definition for abduction, and I'm trying to quickly get the.
It's more described. It's not a definition. Let me be clear. It is described as the best
inference to the best explanation.
Inference to the best possible explanation for a case of something. I
guess you're right. Yeah.
It's described that way. I wouldn't really call that a definition, because you could also say that, well, the best explanation for saying that, well, it's a little bit different to say that Daisy is...
Example, the conclusion does not logically follow from the premises.
Well, it's not like deductively doesn't follow.
Well, hold on. So I'm reading from the SCP. It says, in these examples, the conclusion does not follow logically from the premises. For instance, does not follow logically, blah, blah, blah. Nor do you have useful statistical data about X. that might ward an inference from the information that you have about X, and through the conclusion they are what leads to the conclusion what according to a considerable number of philosophers may also warrant this conclusion is precisely the fact that X would best explain the fact. Yeah, aka inference to the best explanation. Sorry, I took out the example. Yeah, but essentially you're 100% accurate. I was wrong. Inference to the best explanation. Interesting.
Yeah. So I guess I don't want to go down this rabbit hole. We can. I'd love.
Well, we're already in the hole.
I know we're already in the rabbit hole. I'm trying to pull
We're
ourselves
seeing
out.
the light. No, it's over. We're done.
Okay, great.
We solved it.
The content of the reading was not abduction and induction, but which I would like to do, but
well, no, we solved it.
Okay.
And also, you challenged me just to be on the record about it.
Sure. Well, we are on the record.
Yeah, and I was right on count 1, and you were right on count 2.
Okay. Well. Okay. 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 Let's go back to this.
I do like that score.
I do want to argue about this, but
that was a bait.
You're baiting me. I'm not gonna bite. All right.
Okay. God forbid we have an argumentative conversation.
Okay. So
we were on
all right.
Space. I think we were last on space, and your example for the
well, here I do want to say something about the beginning. Just to, I guess, before we move on to the math part directly. Is that we have he says in the critique of the critique of purism takes no foundation as given except reason itself, which I just want to kind of historically position why this is interesting. So most of the time when people talk about the given or whatever, at least as far as I can tell, they're talking about sensations, the things that are presumably sort of in between you and the real world, so they're kind of
sense data.
Yeah, sense data. They're indicating what's going on in the real world to some degree or another, or in the outside world.
Indicative,
yeah. And so that's what Hegel kind of
grapples with.
Yeah. He considers the given or the immediate as immediate sensation is immediate, and then he argues against that, but whatever. And then I guess in the analytic philosophy, if you remember, most of what was given for Russell was like little blotches of light and little feelings of sensation of a soft tiger, or not a soft tiger, but just like it feels soft or it feels hard or wet or cold, and those were the
right.
That's kind of what's given to you. And then around the mid 20th century, there's a movement against that. They kind of some of the analytic philosophers decided to argue against kind of empiricism in the 20th century sense of the word, which was mostly that we have a bunch of little sensations and we kind of shove them together and make up and that's how we construct our stuff. But that in Kant, what we start out with is reason, which is actually kind of similar to Descartes, because he was, but so it's just that it's interesting that we start with reason, which whether we do that or not in actuality, I don't know if I agree with, but
yeah. I was just gonna ask you, would you say that, especially in our later years of kind of understanding at a fucking statistical level human beings and how they navigate the world with so much information, it seems that after all, morals, reason, logic, all is downstream from just intuition, raw intuition, and sense data, obviously. But
so I guess I kind of have a wild now that I'm kind of forming this to a degree or another, thought about uh, what is given and how we have reason or whatever. So I do know, I can tell you that at least the mid 20th century analytic philosophers who went against analytic philosophy, he Sellers, at least the one that I've looked at, try to get rid of the notion of the given in any sense of the term. Now the whole argument, no, I don't understand really barely any of it. I just know that that's what they're
Wait,
saying.
wait, what do you mean get rid of the given? Meaning that
As a
it doesn't belong in the conversation, or temporarily?
the given as in that there's like a foundation of truth that that we can start with
Careful.
that we do know is true, and then we can move on to something else. Like that there is a foundation to
That we
our
should
knowledge.
that one exists, or that we should, or that we should use it or not use it within conversation.
Well, using it within conversation is fine, but that there is like a base knowledge that like there's nothing that founds this. This is what's given to us, and we are comfortable and know that it is true, and then we can start kind of reasoning forward off of this whatever's given to us. So, for example, in like
Yeah, depending on, I was going to say, depending on the definition of given or
yeah,
the given, it's I could easily agree or completely disagree with that, right? Based on that.
yeah, it's just basically like the given is a bit of thought that is true, and it's just given. You don't have to work for it. You didn't have to reason through. It's provided to you. Um,
And is that accessible to other humans the same way or in a static manner?
I'm not sure what the expound upon that question.
Yes. So whatever the given is, can you give me just a quick example, like a 2-word example of a given?
Yeah. So for Descartes, like what's given is that I am thinking, that I think, like that is something that I have. I know that, and that's the
Now,
foundation of my knowledge.
and so is that given congruent among men?
What, like everybody has that? Yeah. Yes.
So I can look at a secondary person and know if I am privy to the knowledge
Well.
that that's where it gets tricky,
Oh
right?
yeah. So that kind of thing. No. So I mean, I think hopefully you or me myself, I have the knowledge that I think, and then hopefully if I'm good at philosophy and I happen to find good things for what I look for, not imagine, but actually find good things that I can deduce from the fact that I think that
That others.
that you also think, and also you have that as your foundation.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
I message you that I'm gonna do the dishes, and then I do them. You go, okay, Sasha probably
Yes.
thinks.
Yes. Yeah. So loosely speaking, yes, it's kind of like it makes most sense. It makes intuitive sense that like
Oh,
if I have this given, then yes, you also have that given. It's not a
it's not immediately obvious, but
but
upon further investigation,
yeah,
it should
probably.
be relatively accessible.
Yeah, and also I guess if you want to call it the soft sense or the historically, I would imagine that Descartes also felt, not thought, not deduced, but felt that like, oh, if I can have this thought, then my maid also can have this thought, and my friend the butcher also has this
They
thought.
may not know that thought yet, but given the right environment and
Yeah,
prep, it would be fairly understandable that they would have the
yeah,
same, that
yeah,
they also have consciousness or thought or however, whatever
yeah.
it is.
And I think the foundationalism is the
It'd almost be we're scratching onto presuppositional
a little bit.
thought, but it's a pretty loaded way to use that word.
Yes, it is. But so yeah, so foundationalist theories of epistemic justification is a view about the structure of epistemic justification or knowledge. The foundationalist thesis, in short, is that a there are some basic or foundational beliefs that have a positive epistemic status, e.g., they count as justified or as knowledge, without depending on any other beliefs for this status. And b any other beliefs with a positive epistemic status must depend ultimately on foundational beliefs for this status. Um, and so like So for like Descartes, he got to, I think that was what was given to him, and then he inferred from that I exist. Um, and then from that, basically the next goofy thing he inferred was that God exists. Was his next was the next movement. I mean, there's a couple other things that kind of he shoved him there, which is
I mean, God, if I wasn't, no pun intended, God, if I wasn't on the nose with God, we're sniffing really, really close to presuppositionalism, and what's the next thing you say but God, right? Which is
yeah.
right there.
I mean, there's really something. There was God being a presupposition was the next. I do remember the argument, and there's a bunch of presuppositions thrown into that argument, but that's beyond the point. What's important is that we have there's some belief, and then everything else comes out of that. And then similarly, like I guess actually interesting, which is with what Kant is doing here, is that before I come back to Kant, I guess want to hit some empiricism.
Hit me.
Yeah, which is just that like so this would be like Hume, and sure I'll throw Russell on there, which is that you have like these little sensations that are coming to you, and that's really the only thing you know is happening. Now, whether that's an actual thing in the real world is questionable. You have to, like in Russell's words, it's just like the chair or whatever is a logical construction out of all the little sense datas, which is the things that you actually know. And then also you have to be able to say things that you're seeing, right? Like stuff that you're actively having sensations of is really the only thing you can put much weight on epistemically. And then Hume is very similar, but just a little slightly different language, which is that we just shove these sensations together in the mind, and I guess they happen to have they're basically we associate these colors together, and that's kind of what makes these objects like appear as an object. We associate the sensations, and we produce the object.
That goes back to Russell, but I guess it might have not been an original Russell thought, which was the idea behind a color only exists if given a name. Do you recall that?
Yeah, something like yeah. So yeah, you can only
The only reason I know the difference between white and egg white is because once I saw it from like a realtor said that's egg white, and I was like, what's and now I know that it's a grayish white that kind of looks like an eggshell, right? But now I see that color. Otherwise, it would have just been a white to me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That thing only now exists in my mind because it was given as a concept, and now it exists separate from all other objects that before was just a part of the world that I didn't even recognize.
Yes. I mean, it's very, very close. I mean, the Russell language is a little bit more advanced.
Right. It's a few. It sounds like Russell was building off of that original idea.
Yeah. I mean,
Hume idea. Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, but he also did a lot of He did a lot of work. Yes. It's very.
He built it out.
Yeah.
He built it out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's like for like the empirical, you get that. But then now, interestingly enough, we get Kant, who starts out. I mean, I guess what his concern is with. He wants to do metaphysics. He doesn't want to like prove that anything is there at all, or whatever. Or he's not so concerned actually with what there is in the world. Is his primary concern. He's concerned with whether we can do metaphysics. Which then ends up meaning whether we can have synthetic a priori judgments that involve concepts.
And so can you like define, because I wrote that down and I think I went through in each individual word. So there's a couple things here in this section that I wrote down as things that more or less just to go over with you, because I can look up the definitions in the book, but that's not going to tell me what it means, what he means by these words in concept, and especially when you put those three words together, right, in a sentence. That means something very specific to Kant and in concept or in context. So starting with that, and then the math section, I have a number of,
Yeah. So well, I guess so. Yeah. So it's interesting because he's trying to figure out if we
Oh, hold on. Sorry. Can I try? Can I try to explain it and then you correct
go ahead.
or?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So it does it go back to that kind of image in the mind versus the real world thing, right?
What does?
The synthesizing.
Mm-hmm.
Does that at all correlate or have anything to do with the synthesizing of images in the mind?
Definitely. Yep.
Yeah, so the idea that one concept can flow to another, it's almost like he's talking about, so not only are we synthesizing, right? So we are creating based on he had used an example, right? It was like something um like it, let's say it's raining, right? Like I'm going to be able to synthesize in my mind that when I go outside I'm not going to implode,
Mm-hmm.
right? I have something in my mind, even though I've never seen this water and rain before. There's something I'm synthesizing. I think I'm missing the mark, but
No.
go
You're definitely
ahead.
right. Yeah. So the thing about like there being it's raining outside, and I don't think that I'll implode if I walk outside, is a synthetic thought. Definitely, 100%. Um, but then there's a slightly difference between like that kind of synthetic judgment and the I guess ape. So that's in ape.
Then it's the a priori that it
Yeah.
comes before experience.
Yeah, so there's like before experience, without experience, beyond experience. There's a bunch of really bad
Right.
analogies for like what that fucking means. Um, but in a lot of ways, it's without having to resort to experience. Like I don't have to stand my judgment on experience, which is
Right, I don't have to put my hand on every stove to know that the stove's hot.
well, that's
Or is that too far ahead, meaning I don't even have to touch a stove to know that it's going to burn me even though I've never touched a stove?
well, so like when you go like you touch a stove, oh that's hot, and you touch a stove, oh that's hot, and then you go look at another stove and you go like the way that you make a judgment that the stove is gonna be is hot, and then you also probably very closely to that think that if I touch my hand, it's gonna hurt. That is very much entirely based off of all of your previous experience with hot stoves, and so
And no matter
therefore,
what you tell me, I'm going to believe that previous experience
yeah,
first.
yeah, I could try to
Uh,
argue with you and be
you
stupid and
can
be
try to
like,
argue with me, but
you don't
it's going to
know
be
if it's
impossible. It's just like math, like we talked about last time, right? In our last discussion. That, like, no matter what some fucking guy came up to me and told me, he could tell me he's Einstein Jr.,
mm-hmm.
but he's not going to be able to argue me off of 2 plus 2 is 4.
Yeah,
Without, I mean, just without like the world saying on BBC News that 2 plus 2 is no longer 4, and the World Trade Center is alive again, right? Like without like that's a priori, right?
yeah.
Almost
Yes, yeah. So the thing about the stove is that the stove is a posteriori or from experience.
posteriori. Yeah,
Yep, a posteriori or a posterior, whatever. Uh, fucking Latin. I was
I think it's posteriori. You had it
yeah,
right.
yeah. So because the judgment that you were able to do was based off of previous experience, whereas something like a priori stuff, it shouldn't resort
A
to
priori is like almost like a good example would be like we jump when we see spiders. Like we don't even need to be told to do that. Like our bodies just do that. It's just a feeling. And let's say we lived in a world where spiders were all venomous and killed you. It would make like that's a valid a priori reaction, right?
um.
Obviously, these days it doesn't matter. But am I wrong?
So like I guess a thought. I don't know
Prior
if
to
it's
experience,
like
I mean, we're
at
get
least the realm. If we want to be in the realm of things that are a priori, I don't want to talk about whether this is exactly synthetic or analytic, but is that there is no whole number between 0 and 1. Like that's just you don't have to. I don't have to look at. I'm not gonna go around and count
there's
things.
no whole number.
Yeah, like there's
Okay.
yeah,
So, okay,
like there's one whole number between
it's
0 and
almost self-evident.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
It's in that kind of like you have to think about it in your head, um, without
Okay,
having
that's
recourse.
the difference. I'm not. It's not like a knee-jerk reason. I
No.
actually have to. It's a thought-through concept.
Yeah. So I think a possible like so it gets the line between
That's a good
experience
example, by the way.
and
Yeah.
possible experience. Yeah. is like if I can. So when he's talking about like geometry is a very good, I guess, place to think about the a priori realm, right? Like, so you can imagine in your head.
Ironically, I failed it twice. It's the only
Yeah.
class I ever failed.
Well,
so that's probably why I don't know any about it.
no. You don't have to go too much into actual geometry, but you can go like in your head. You can imagine like three dots, and I can now start imagining lines between those dots.
Hypotenuse and all that. Yeah.
Well, you don't have to. You don't have to go that far. Just I can now, and I'm thinking that's just what a triangle is, and it has three sides, whatever. Right. And then you can now go, well, now if I put a triangle next to it, and there's two triangles, and then if you kind of like, I don't know, do something like match up two of the sides of the triangles and suppose that those sides are the same length, now you've got a thing with four sides with a line through it.
Right.
Yeah, and you're all doing this just in your head. You never like, I guess you never saw two triangles and put them together and saw that they looked like, they had four sides. You never did that. Yeah, I don't know. But you can do all that in your head, and you can like, even if like nobody's ever asked you the sum of 19 and 42. This is not geometry, but you could sit there and you could fucking figure it out, right? And you wouldn't have to go and find 17 things and then 42 things and then count them all up individually. You could like.
Oh, you're overestimating. No, just kidding.
Yeah, you could like you could either do it in your head or you could do it on paper, but that's kind of the weird the blur between where like, well, is it really separate from experience if you had to do it on paper? Because I think that's a possible argument against Kant. Because like
I think that's pedantic. That we're if our mind is just an image of the world, I could argue that all I'm doing is making another image, whether I'm imagining it or writing it down. I would say it's of the same effect, right? I'm just giving my brain more RAM space.
Yes. Actually, that's very interesting. So, because like now I'm thinking about a little bit if we bring some wrestling. So the referent in a lot of ways of like things that are in the world, like tables, the referent of it is supposed to be the thing in itself, right? There's supposed to be some fucking actual table.
Matter of the fact underneath it all.
Yeah, but the interesting thing is that when I write the number 3 on the page, I'm not like referencing a number 3 that's like somewhere else. It's like it's not the number 3 that's below the lead on the paper. It's the concept that's in my head is really all that it's all that it references or refers.
Yeah,
to.
just giving my brain space more RAM. I'm plugging in an SD card on.
Yeah.
With graphite.
So and that's the kind of the realm, and also like the kind of realm where Descartes goes, I think therefore I am. That's the realm of where you're like, because he didn't like. He was just thinking, and then he's like, well, I am thinking, and if I doubt I'm thinking, then that. So either I am thinking or I'm not thinking. If I'm not thinking, then I'm thinking that I'm not thinking, which is a way of thinking, which means I'm thinking.
Right.
And so, and I didn't, I didn't have to like go around and like ask people like, am I thinking? And then people go, yes, you're thinking. And then, ask somebody, am I thinking? And then somebody goes, yes, you're thinking. And neither
I get what you're saying.
Yeah, neither did I have to like go to the market and go, am I thinking right now? Yes. And then I went to the barn and I went, am I thinking? And you go, yes, I'm thinking. And then I went over to the well and I went, am I thinking? You go, yes, I'm thinking. I didn't like induce that. Like that didn't happen from experience. I thought, and then after I thought all those things, then I was like, I am thinking. And then I can also now say that I exist. Whatever. That's the kind of the realm where where metaphysics is gonna sit.
The realm. Yeah, that makes
like the realm of the types of thinking that is a priori, whatever.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, yeah. That's what you're talking. Okay. Yeah, that's fair. That's all fair.
Yeah. So you then then the synthetic analytic is yeah. So the synthetic a priori judgments are the interesting one to him for doing metaphysics, because I guess for him all analytic thoughts are, or all analytic judgments are a priori, which is kind of weird. Um, well, it's not weird. I guess it's an interesting thing to think about, because then you get concepts like yellow or gold is yellow or whatever. Gold is uh, a malleable material, because you think, oh, well, that all comes from experience, but how is it a priori to think that? Well, I get this is what, like, the concept. So like the concept itself came from experience, because he had to, like, poke gold with a hot rod or something like that. But then I guess the judgment that gold is, because now you've incorporated malleability into the concept of gold, and now you just have that concept in your head, and that just exists. And now I'm gonna make the judgment, which involves both having the concept and then applying a predicate to it. And in this particular instance, where do I get the predicate from? I take it from the concept itself, and I construct the judgment. And that's, yeah.
That makes sense. I
Um,
agree.
yeah. Uh, yeah, but so the synthetic a priori is the because he wants to distinguish metaphysics from normal sciences, because normal sciences are synthetic a posteriori. They go, well, here's a lot of things in the world, and we put them together, and we're getting very close to doing certain things. And so he's very annoyed that metaphysics just keeps bouncing around, and also that Hume just also said that it can never be done, because he's dedicated his life to it. So that's probably why he's motivated to do this. um, yeah, and then he just so he had to, for I guess for whatever reason he just wanted to figure out, well, how is metaphysics possible? And then he had to figure out, well, what kind of thoughts is metaphysics involved in, and that's the synthetic a priori. And then he's gonna go in and try to figure out why that, how could we possibly do that? Because at least for him, at the very least, which is where he starts, is math and geometry is synthetic a priori. And so if we could figure out how that's doing it, then maybe we could figure out how to possibly do it in metaphysics.
Yeah. Well, and the challenge is he talking about doing it or solving it, right?
Solving.
Metaphysics.
Uh, yes. Eventually, well, I don't know about solving metaphysics, but basically setting things up so that it can move forward.
Because
Like,
everyone can say they're doing it, right? I don't know what separates his definition of doing metaphysics or the way he's using it
in
like that.
his emotional way, it's like saying a 3-year-old is doing, like, oh, no, okay, not a 3-year-old. We'll go with a first grader.
That was
It's
super.
like the difference between a first grader going and, like, doing science, and like somebody who's like 43 and is got their PhD 10 years ago, and they're doing science or whatever. Like,
Right.
that it's rigorous. Like, somebody, you can make synthetic a priori claims, but whether they're true or not, that's where that like kind of illusory portion comes in, where you're just making shitty you're just making shitty judgments. You're making claims in that realm, but that whether they're true or not is very questionable. Which is why he wants to kind of like talk about how like how could we do this? Like, how are we doing? Because it seems like a lot of people are trying to do analogously. People doing biology are trying to do it by licking pencils. Like, that's not how you do biology. So analogously with Kant, he's going, well, a lot of people are trying to say they're trying to do metaphysics, but they're just licking pencils or something like that.
Right.
So
Somehow I understand what you're saying.
yeah. Uh, mhm.
So, and obviously he is clearly, this is not only this is like a rebuttal to like the community, his readers, right? Like this book, right, is a very, you can tell, a very
Yeah.
angry rebuttal
Yeah.
to people.
There's I think there's a big confluence of motivations going on. Yeah. And I think, like, one of them is like well, at least apparently, presumably one of the ones that he really motivated him was that Hume said that metaphysics was impossible because it's all just we're all just conditioned. All of our thoughts are just conditioned, and the idea that all of our thoughts that we thought were coming from reason were really just coming from experience. Um,
Who knew that Kant would go out and around, create an entire movement just to do the full horseshoe back to Hume's position
in a lot of ways, that's a
after
lot
his
of what it
death?
is.
Yep.
Yeah, I'd say that was probably the big kicker. And the second one is probably also that there's a lot like metaphysics. He's noticed because he's studied philosophy for a while that over the last couple hundred years, philosophy really doesn't seem to have moved forward anywhere, and it just kind of keeps hodgepodging back and forth compared to something like science, which has gotten pretty successful at this point.
What do you? This is a little step out, but what do you think would cause us to take another step forward in philosophy? Because it does seem like we're in a sort of stagnant period. But I don't know if I mean what.
Yeah. Um,
As someone who wants to, at least at one
right.
time, wanted to get into the
Yeah.
education of philosophy, you've got to have thoughts on it.
And I still have the motivate. I still have the desire. But yeah. So I guess the nefarious thing about doing like, well, at least metaphysics. So ethics, I think, is going to be stuck in philosophy for a long time, or at least metaethics, which is the foundations of ethics. But the nefarious thing about doing metaphysics is that once it kind of starts getting a grip on reality, it just becomes its own subdiscipline and it stops being philosophy. um,
So if I can reiterate what you're saying, the minute it becomes fact, it turns into a science or its own subdivision, like psychology or
yeah,
something like that.
yeah, um, yep.
Hmm. It's super unsatisfying, but obviously that's
Yeah, I don't know.
it's I think it's inarguable. Well, obviously it's
Um,
arguable, but I would say that's fair.
yeah, I
Fuck.
mean, I want to have like, I mean, I want to be able to say something else. Um,
I don't like it.
I mean, I think if we had more smart people working on it, we could get it moving along. So maybe if our culture valued it higher, that would help. But that doesn't. That's not really substantive. That's more
Well, it's also
situational.
very gate kept, which I think Kant even kind of talks about a little bit, right? The gatekeeping of.
I don't. At least in what we read today, does he say it?
I'm might be mistaken, but he definitely talks about the average person versus the whole, something to that. It might have been somewhere else, but I never mind. I don't have a citation.
Mm-hmm.
You wanted to talk about the math.
Ah, yes. So we got the we got the Copernican revolution in here. So this is the really it's like this is my like I'd say fourth attempt at trying to grasp Kant, and I mean it gets better every time. Every time I'm like, I don't know. Every time I can keep doing it, I'm like, this fucking makes sense. And then like if I give it like 2 or 3 months afterwards, I'm like, I don't remember any of that shit, which usually means I didn't understand it. Because there's a decent amount of other things where I'm like, I can, did grasp what was being said, and I can kind of, iterate it. Um, but I don't know.
Is
And
Kant more of a tuple or a dictionary or no? Sorry. Go ahead.
then, oh yes, right. Is it? What kind of iterable is he?
Yes.
Very good joke. I like. That was very dorky of you, Sasha. Thank you.
Yeah, I know. Well, so
Um,
a little just side note. Jessica had notated about how um, one of her colleagues was interviewing someone and like bragged that um, he didn't hire someone because they didn't know the difference between a list and a tuple. Which I laughed at, not knowing what a tuple was at the time. I just knew it existed and was kind of like a list. So then I looked it up, and now I know what a tuple is, and it totally makes sense because she's in data, right? Like that's a pretty bog standard thing. I've got to imagine you have to use in data. Maybe not as much, but she was like, "Yeah, what an idiot for bragging about that." So now I know what a tuple is, and I can reference it.
Very nice.
Huh.
I don't use tuples much or ever in my Pythonian world. I want to say what it is, but I'm not super confident about it, which is just that it's a set-sized list. Or it's a list that's size 2.
It's essentially the gap between a string and a list. So if I were to convert a list to a string, it does not retain its index, right? But if I were to convert it to a tuple, I could then convert it back to a list without any issue, but I cannot add or subtract from it. It's going to stay the same amount. I would need to reconvert it.
Yeah.
But it's like a JSON dictionary. I can convert to JSON and back and serialize. It's very malleable. But that static nature, right? If I want something to stay static, I could see in data using it. I haven't thought of a good reason to want it or need it, but I know how to use it, and that's all that matters.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So yeah. Well. So was I wrong saying that it's just a
Yeah, I would say. Yeah, I would say you're
basically
right.
a list that's a fixed size. You can't change the size of it. I don't know if that's whatever. All right. Oh, yeah. So we get the Copernicus. So there's two things that are happening here, which is fun. We get the like straightforward like. Okay, we get the Copernican revolution. You know, classic Copernican revolution, which is really like a reverse Copernican revolution because Copernicus stopped, removed humans from the center of the universe and put us on the sidelines. Whereas what Kant did is he took space and time and put us right at the center of it.
Yes, can you talk about how he talks about space and time? That was interesting, but I didn't fully. The way Kant talks about space and time.
Yeah, so
He seems to shoehorn it there in, but maybe obviously because this is all revision.
yeah,
I didn't see how it fit into the whole. Go ahead.
Yeah, so the first thing to say, I guess, is that he's not articulating the entire argument here because he mostly just wants to present the ideas and not the full.
Yeah, and this is supposed to be a follow up to this book, right? So
Yeah.
like you should have reviewed the.
Yeah, so for the most part, he's just kind of quickly throwing the ideas at you, and then to some degree or another, it's like he is responding to people who didn't like his book, or who thought incorrectly of him. So, and the other thing you're going to want to think about is that
I'll take your suggestion, but I'll think about what the fuck I want. Sorry.
So the way that he arrives at this Copernican revolution is with the other aspect of this, which is the kind of his I guess if you want to call it his logic, the way that he is thinking about it, which is that we must rely on something already known to be dependable, from which we can go forward and ascend to the sources, which are not yet known, and whose discovery not only will explain what is known already, but will also exhibit an area with many cognitions. And that's from what I remember being told about this before, that's called a transcendental logic. You go, I know this is true, and then how is it possible that this is true? Like, what is, how could we possibly do this? And I guess those two peculiarities. One is that what he's going to start with is a specific realm of a priori synthetic thoughts, which is math, pure math at least. And then the other thing he's going to do is it moves along in a series of questions. which is it's questions in logic will formal logic at least are very difficult to work with. So I just find it interesting that he is able to use it here. So he starts. So it starts out with like we have pure math. We have pure mathematics. We're not really. I already talked about that, and we already know that it's synthetic a priori. And so now he goes, how is pure mathematics possible? And then we get, well, how does it do that? Mathematical cognitions have to represent its concepts first in intuition, or pure intuition. So it's like kind of like when I was talking about like you could imagine 3 dots in your head and you can kind of connect them with lines, and then you could take another triangle and then you could kind of fit them together and pretend that you're fitting them on the sides that have the same length, and then you got an object that has 4 sides. So when I'm saying like 3 dots, like the concept dot, I'm kind of inducting the intuition of a dot. So the dot is the concept, but the actual thing that's there is an intuition that's in your head. And then I start talking about triangle. Well, like really, triangle is the concept. It's more like the name for the concept that is. You have these 3 lines that are all touching each other. So yeah, so we have math has to present its concepts for itself in first and intuition, and then we go, how is it possible to intuit something a priori? And then so since we, and then he kind of kicks us to the side here because he says an intuition is a representation of the sort which would depend immediately upon the presence of an object. And then you go, well, how can the intuition of an object precede the object itself? And then he goes, if the a priori intuition of the object contains nothing else except the form of sensibility which in me as subject precedes all actual impressions through which I am affected by objects. God. Oh, that's how it does it. So how can the intuition of object precede the object itself? Well, if the intuition of the object contains nothing but the form of sensibility. So it's the form of sensibility is how we intuit an object without there being an object there. And then, what is the form of sensibility? That is space and time. Are the intuitions upon so space and time are the intuitions upon which pure mathematics bases all its cognitions and judgments. And now we got that space and time are in our head.
That was, I would say, a little bit better than how Kant explained it, just as far as my ability to grasp. I think moving as we move on, I'll continue to understand it better. So you were saying something to the effect of yeah. So continue. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean that's it. And then there's this and he kind of goes on for a while, kind of defending the point about that space and time are the intuitions upon which pure mathematics bases all of its cognitions and judgments. That space and time are the forms of sensibility. So, I guess when you think of any like color or object or smell. Although smell is a weird one, possibly get into that, but they always happen in space and time, and then they get he continues to defend that space and time are actually in our heads, or from us.
Well, yeah, doesn't he make the case that basically without humans there would be no space and time to an extent? I don't remember if he does.
I mean, yeah, that's pretty much what I mean. Yes, that space and time do not apply to things in themselves.
Right.
Like in the same way that like the color red is really happens in me in my head. In that same way, space and time happen in my head.
That's a perfect bridge. Yeah, perfect way to bridge those two thoughts, because that's that was well done.
Yeah.
Because I would say because that's why he's also fighting. He's outlining what is an almost idealist
Yeah.
framework,
Mm-hmm.
which is why he has to fight that so much.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yep. Yep. Um. Yeah. So he has a couple of arguments for saying why. Well, on the first hand, that we can have space and time in our heads alone, and then he has a couple. I guess he has at least one argument where he talks about how space and time could not be in the objects themselves. And I'm not sure I wrote all of them down, and I'm not sure if I could remember them. But let's see if I could. Uh, Let me see if I can try to do some of this. Okay. So I'll just read whatever this.
Yeah, take your time.
Um, yeah. So this is where we're gonna try to show that space and time are in our heads. Um, so if one eliminates from the empirical intuitions of bodies and their alterations everything empirical, that is that which belongs to the sensation. So if you remove everything empirical, which is anything sensational like colors and smells, then space and time still remain, and therefore we say that they are pure intuitions that underlie the empirical intuitions. And for that reason, can never themselves be eliminated from the intuition of the object. Okay. So then let me look. So.
By the way, I was 100% sure the minute we'd start this Kant stuff up and some of this thicker philosophy that I wouldn't be able to keep up at all compared to like my our previous goes at this with me.
Yeah.
And the thick stuff was always a little tough, but this is having a bit of a foundation and some of it not being first time I'm hearing it. This is much more enjoyable.
Oh yeah. Awesome. I'm glad. And yeah, also like I'll notice too, like as I go in and out of doing philosophy, like it gets more comfortable doing it as you've kind of been sitting in it. Kind of like with like warming up in music or something.
It's like a second language
Yeah.
almost.
Yeah. And
Every word means something different. You know.
Yeah, if you don't use it, it kind of starts fading away. But then you can kind of start bringing it back. You can cultivate it and bring it back. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Yeah, and and then the more times you keep hitting it, it just keeps getting better, or clearer, I guess. What about clearer? Easier? I'm not sure.
Palatable.
Yes. Yes. Yep. That's good. That's a good word for it. I
have the best words.
Yes, you do have the best words. You also got indicative. Is that the word I was trying to say before? Yeah.
Yeah, there's a couple in a row there where I was very rudely just like inserting language.
Well, I couldn't think of the word, so it got us to move on. Okay, so whether this is a good argument or not, what that argument just showed was that we have space and time in our heads. Sure, we can admit that. And I guess the other part of the argument is that space and time doesn't relate to things in themselves, which I wasn't. Now that I'm trying, like, I've actually thinking this through. I didn't pin that down when I was reading this, but I think I know two spots where it could be. So it's either going to be in section 11 or in note 1. Oh yeah. So 11. I just had to. He was just okay. Space is nothing other than the form of all outer appearances under which alone objects of appearance can be given. Okay, if sensibility presented objects as they are in themselves, then the space of the geometer would be taken for mere fabrication and have no objective validity. That's still not doing it for me. Okay. Yeah, there's something like, okay, I don't want to try to make this up. Let me just look at what he says.
Make it up. I'm not actually. I know it shows up. Oh, it may not. moment.
Okay, so one argument for saying that, if you doubt that space and time are forms of sensibility, quote, I would very much like to know how he can find it possible to know a priori, and therefore before all acquaintance with things, how their intuition must be constituted, which certainly is the case here with space and time. Um, End quote. So he's still only saying that the 12. Oh, there's some interesting thing that, like, he says intuition is not bounded by anything, because he's talking about how I can intuit the concept of infinity, like a straight line that goes on for forever. That's interesting.
You
There's
can.
that you yeah you I can intuit the I have an intuition of infinity.
I have a symbol in my mind that represents it, but I wouldn't. And I can. Yeah, I guess it's all in the definition of what he means. But yeah, I would
I mean, that's
contend
just what he
with.
says. You could disagree with him.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, the other thing about this section 12 is kind of funny, and a lot of problems that happen really quickly after. So a lot of this interesting part of, I guess, is metaphysics, where he decides to pull space and time out of the independent world, the mind independent world, and put it in the mind dependent world. Is that a lot of his demonstrations and supporting arguments have to do with Euclidean geometry, where he's like, "There's no other way you could possibly think about this. This is how it is in intuition. It has to be this way." Is that it was?
Is that something that is now defunct?
Not defunct, but that's not the only case. So it's not universally that way. Euclidean geometry still is real. You still use it, but there's obviously non-Euclidean geometry, which got not popular, but came into being. I'd say about 40 years after this. Yeah. Okay, it was not widely okay. Geometries that deviated from Euclidean geometry were not widely accepted as legitimate until the 19th century. For at least 1,000. Okay. And all mostly comes down to the fifth postulate. We don't have to. Well, I'll say it. If a straight line falls on two straight lines in such a manner that the interior angle on the same side are together less than two right angles, then the straight lines, if produced indefinitely, meet on that side on which the angles less than the two if produced indefinitely, meet on that side on which are the angles less than the two right angles. Which is basically to say, like, the kind of not converse, contrapositive of that is if you have two straight lines, and then you have and that there's a line that can pass through them both perpendicularly, then those two original lines will indefinitely never touch. So that's the postulate that I guess most people. So it kind of came down to. What I'm surprised about is that they're talking about some Muslims here from the first, I guess, mid-medieval, the mid-medieval, Islamic Golden Age. Somebody tried to do some shit in the 17th century, 18th century, and then we get the discovery of non-Euclidean geometry with Gauss. I wanted to know this off the top of my head. And Schweikart, who discovered it independently about 5 years after him. So it was 1813. It was discovered. Which is interesting because saying it's discovery makes it sound like it was out there and you uncovered it, as opposed
Right.
to I made it
Like
up, which is kind of what like. That's kind of I don't know. Like this is like well that's the interesting thing too is that you can discover geometrical proofs like that still goes on, but it still all happens in intuition, which I
think
guess
about it like this. I just had a brain fart. Uh, it's like I'm going to use Python, but it's for every language. It's like a Python library. You can
okay.
invent a new type of library, like one for AI, or you can just create well, no, you can discover or you can create
Mm-hmm.
like you can discover like the way that AI, library would be, or you can just create a completely new concept. Well,
Yeah.
I guess that AI would be the new concept, and then, or just an emblem. I need to workshop that one, but there's something there.
Yeah. Well, yeah. The difference between discovering and making up. Yeah. I guess the thing about when you're discovering the library, it was already there, and it's also kind of out there in the world, and you had to go find it. Like if I discover a treasure, or I discover like if I discovered bacteria for the first time or whatever. I guess the weird thing is that it was always already there. I just discovered it
Yeah.
as opposed to made it up. I guess I mean that is what I mean really well okay I guess because what Kant wants to say is that this is synthetic a priori, which is that we're making it up and not making it up, we're putting things together, we're constructing things, like we're creating things.
Synthesizing from what
Yeah,
already is.
exactly, yeah, whereas
There are things there, and we are creating a new thing, but it's not. It didn't appear.
yeah, but that's the peculiar thing about a lot of like math things is that like it feels like it was always that way, just nobody articulated it.
Right. Well, and that's kind of the when philosophy becomes math or science or fact,
Yeah.
is that it was all is that anything that disappears from philosophy or anything that we solve, right, then becomes math, and it was already there
Mm-hmm.
in a way.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. So anyway, the whole thing of it being non-Euclidean kind of somewhat pulled the rug out from underneath the Kant, but that was some post-Kantian work people did. That was part of their job was to, you know, fix that problem.
Fuck over.
Yeah, rework some of this part of the Kantian system. Because I don't think it's not very difficult to kind of rework that. You go like, yeah, well, they still had to do all of this in their intuition. They didn't like. Um. So the other thing about like, okay, I don't know if I need to go into this, but this is one of my like.
No. Please do, because
Okay,
I'm just
so
dribbling the ball. I'm not playing Rocket League.
sure.
I'm just dribbling it.
So in a similar way that, how it's like, well, Russell kind of snuck in some metaphysical entities in his pre-metaphysics, which namely were logical simples. Um,
Right.
Kant seems to be kind of like sneaking in metaphysical concepts before we're doing metaphysics. I mean, I guess what metaphysics, properly speaking, is doing judgments, but we also have metaphysical concepts. I guess we're just gonna go with this, but
We're talking about the beginning, right? The beginning of where he talks about
well, even
uh
because we haven't even gotten to metaphysics yet for Kant. We're still just how is it possible, and how are we
right.
understanding how it's possible to do this? Is that we're using concepts that feel rather like honestly psychological, which is even past metaphysics in terms of its like it's being founded. Because presumably for Kant, you should have your transcendental philosophy, and then that grounds your metaphysics, and then your metaphysics constitutes your psychology, or basically your psychology, your natural science, or like physics or whatever, chemistry and all that crap, and also your theology, and then it also should found your ethics, somewhere in those lines. It sounds like the concept of like intuition, uh, like intuition and concepts, even the concept of concepts and the concept of intuition are a little. They feel a little metaphysical, like they're kind of like getting like we can't not do metaphysics when we're trying to ground metaphysics. It just feels that way. It's like
Well, and that's why I didn't like his tone in the beginning.
Yeah,
Well, and it is that well, God, you guys over there, you need to wake up because you're missing layer one, and
mm-hmm.
it's like, well, by your tone, you're kind of, I would say, you are getting further, but like you haven't reached your, I would say, like open-mindedness
Yeah,
to smaller and smaller concepts by the fact that you are so egoistic about your ability to break down concepts.
yeah. I mean, in a large part, yeah. I mean, he his tone makes him sound like because he also makes it sound like I am totally right and I am 100% right
Yes,
on everything, which really
but I
always.
guess he kind of, I'm gonna guess it helps him become relevant. I'm sure there are a lot of philosophers we read that got basically nowhere because they were humble, but having a bit of provocation was probably necessary in this time period,
I mean,
to get your message out with
perhaps, yeah,
the
that's
number of
possible.
people.
I mean, I think yeah, it could be cultural. I can't say whether it was or not, but that's a it's a good explanation, and also it
It's
doesn't.
like it's like the you're gonna get more like the if you write a letter to or write an email, let's say to your favorite like YouTuber, he's not going to read the or she's not going to read the average Bogart email. But if you go, hey, fuckface, you're really fucking wrong over here because look at the shit here. You know, like you're gonna get the person's attention because
Yeah, and that's actually
sorry.
yeah, that is a yes, that is one thing that. So I watched this a lecture on how to write in like how to write
Persuasive essays.
as a scholar,
Ooh,
like
interesting.
as a active professional. Uh,
Like in a persuasive
uh,
like essay style or in just your average
whether you're
like academic
doing
neutral.
yeah academic stuff. So like whether you're like doing meteorology or philosophy, whatever it is, how to write, because the problem is that most uh high school.
Okay, can I guess?
Go ahead.
I was just gonna guess that the reason I guess I'm kind of like bulldozing with persuasive essays is I almost feel like all writing should be that way. That all writing should start with your basic concept at a high level. You are trying anyone who pretends that they're not trying to influence the reader is lying to themselves and the reader, and you have to be able to get across as an academic a concept, and that requires some sort of persuading and laying out of evidence and being concise. Sorry. So you are selling your idea whether you know it or not, and even if you feel grossed out by that term. Is
Hmm.
that fair, or am I off?
Yeah, no, that's fair. There's a little bit more particulars to it, at least what the guy was saying. That is what you're supposed to be doing. I mean, I guess you kind of are. Yeah, mostly you don't get graded well on a paper whether you're persuasive or not. I guess the way that, at least he's saying that a lot of universities grade is not on whether you're persuasive, but whether you demonstrated that you understand the course material, not that you changed anybody's mind or whatever. Or
Well, and yeah, and obviously persuasive could be loaded, which is why as icky as the term sounds, you're persuading the reader, whether it's your teacher, your professor, or the journal members who are doing peer review. There
yeah,
is a reader. They are being sold on whether you should get an A or
yes.
your ideas or theories
So,
are.
and as to your point about, I guess with Kant and the way that he's speaking, it just might be, I guess maybe like situationally caused in some way or motivated. Is that what this guy was saying? Is that what you need to do is first of all you want to get published and you want to get read now, and the way to do that is to be relevant to the whatever's going
Twitter
on.
hashtags almost
Yeah,
is how it's
you need
been
to be
described.
relevant to what's going on in the world. And how do you be relevant? You say, "Hey, all the smart people that are in this world,
Yes, your shit's wrong
you,
here, here, and here.
well, they're also you need to puff them up a little bit. So you go like, you were great, you did a pretty good job, but you missed this
I really
part,
liked your critique of pure reason,
right?
but when you
Something
wrote
along
the
those lines.
follow up, you were a real cunt.
Yeah,
Uh,
you're a real Kant when you wrote your Proglegomena. Yeah, so I guess there's like some play. So there was that. That was the more I guess I
I,
guess.
I read about something similar just on that piece alone
Hmm.
from Economist, talking about how nothing basically gets published unless it's like super super like a hot topic, right?
Yeah.
Um, like literally, there was a literal study that got buried about trans people because it made trans people look bad, and it was like literally trans people are like influencing science, like outcomes, not like study outcomes, not even just the paper, well, let alone the papers
Yeah.
that let's say go against trans, that trans women are women or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Um,
And that is also like one kind of like bummer about getting
yep,
published scientifically is that a lot of people
it's
who
no
do
longer just science. Well, I
well,
guess it never
well,
was science like we thought it was, but yeah,
on the other hand, like one of the important pieces of science is that there's multiple verifications and like you replicate somebody's, either
right,
study or you replicate their experiment. And the problem with getting published is that nobody wants like it's not as exciting to read, "Hey, I did this thing that the smart guy did
right.
and he was
It's
right."
always exciting to cure AIDS or cancer or
Or
have the next fucking big headline versus we, made this small adjustment or
or not
whatever.
even a small adjustment, just that I did the same exact thing that this guy did and I got the same exact
Mm,
result. Which is
right.
which should be that should be around.
Like that Parkinson's thing. Like we were so excited about it was either Parkinson's or no, dementia or the forgetful disease, Alzheimer's. There was
Alzheimer's.
like a drug that everyone
You
said.
couldn't remember
Yeah,
it?
yeah, it's funny. There's a study and a medicine that went around for like 40 years. It was basically just never tested or and was like recently disproven wholly and completely.
Huh.
Um, and just like it's a disease that we have no understanding of, and the one little bit of understanding we had on it was done by a guy 40 years ago, and was like just demolished in the last 6 months. And yeah,
Well, that's a bummer for him. Um. Hmm. Yeah, so that's a bummer. But yeah, you want to. So yes, he could be. So like a lot of what he's doing, he's going. Descartes was wrong, and whatever Berkeley was
right.
wrong. Although they're a little
He's
past
name
in time.
dropping.
In a way, yeah, he is name dropping.
He's like, hey, fucking, uh,
Yeah, he's calling people. I mean, the problem is that those people were. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, they were dead by the time that this came out, so it wouldn't.
yeah, but most people are dead.
Yeah. Okay, I want to see if I can find his argument for why space and time don't apply to things in themselves. Let's see if I can.
Yeah. So two things.
Hmm.
And of course this is just for after you're done with that next topic. I want to argue and we may just agree, who knows, if psychology is truly even a soft science, or is it all just like a post hoc rationalization? Um, uh, and then I have a modern marvels on the pyramids if we have time
Oh hell yeah.
afterwards. I was like, and of course, could it be another worldly, otherworldly explanation? It's like a 2005 Modern Marvels, like a show I used to like on History Channel,
Hmm.
and it's just some dope shit.
All right. All right. I'm gonna. Oh. Hmm. Okay.
Indubitably.
Oh. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, well, let me
Did you
let
have
me
the Bertrand Russell quote in yours?
about what?
Was Bertrand Russell cited towards the end of yours? That section we were reading,
Which section?
the
The
book,
I know, but like, they have titles on them.
the very last paragraph
The very last paragraph.
of what we were reading. In mine, there was a Bertrand Russell quote.
Uh, at the very end of Barclay's three dialogues. Not that.
Wait, you keep doing what you're doing, and I'll pull the
Okay.
quote.
Yes. Let's read, or speed gloss.
Oh no, it was.
Uh, you still looking?
I found my. It was actually pulled from somewhere else.
Okay.
Analysis.
So
I tagged you in it. Go ahead.
I can't quite grasp exactly why. Well, there's not an easy spot I can point to that's like, here's one sentence and this is more or less it.
Well, look at the quote for you talk about space and time, right?
Yeah, why space
And
and
properties of
time
the world.
aren't.
Look at the general chat.
Okay.
It was also the quote I found interesting.
Space and time are like mental spreadsheets that organize how information is organized in our minds. Bertrand Russell explains this idea. If you always wore blue spectacles, you would be sure of seeing everything blue. Similarly, since you always wear spatial spectacles in your mind, you are sure of always seeing everything in space. Yeah, so I mean, that's kind of where I was about to go with it. I guess something like that. Uh, which is that whether space and time, if space and time do actually exist in the world, that like in the well, not in the world, in things in themselves, then well, that we don't even really know anything about that. But the words that we're using right now to talk about space, like this width, and 5 minutes ago, those words point to concepts, and that concept is really part like that is I guess in our head, and they're not like I
Yeah,
guess
just like colors. It's the exact same thing as the
I mean
color analogy.
I guess because he wants to say that everything a part of our experience comes from us, or well, not comes from us, but
The appearance,
comes from appearance.
there's the appearance,
It's
right?
limited
Obviously,
to yeah,
there's something in the real world that is. I mean, yes, like if let's say which is unmeasurable and breaks, space time, but like if we had an alien that was looking down upon us who had access to a stopwatch, he would be able to hit it and time would go by it, and it would say 5 on the stopwatch, even if there were no humans. Obviously, that's an imperceivable world.
yeah,
Um, yeah, go ahead.
yeah. I guess, but like the way I guess the way that we use the words, what we want to say is that this is all of a part of our experience. So we have like I don't know, like my yellow to me or
Time
whatever. Like I'm talking about
time
yellow.
can feel like it's going faster than it's actually going, but that's my sense data give me false reads.
I don't
They're
know.
false appearances. I mean, it's a stretch. I mean, I'm just analogizing one sense
Yeah,
data
sure.
of visuals.
So okay. Oh God.
I
I
think
mean,
that's actually a perfect analogy. What's wrong with that?
well,
That
because
that
I'm only like I'm half
perception of time.
I'm half listening. Well, because I'm okay.
I, I'm actually ecstatic with that. Go ahead. I'm
Well, I
interrupting your
mean,
thoughts.
so so the difference between like, okay, I guess the appearance hasn't really been worked out of a as a concept in his mind. Well, as much as representation, because where the illusions come in is in the understanding, because you can like, well, okay, like for what things there are, or like what the
Let's say
appearance. Fuck me.
appearance would just be one piece of sense data, meaning appearance is just how the world is represented in the mind, and the world includes space and time.
Yeah.
That's the way I
Okay.
is that.
Well,
Yeah, and you
sorry.
can
Okay.
continue.
I wasn't actually listening. I'm sorry. I wasn't listening because I thought of a basically a way to kind of start thinking about the way that you were, or like I perceive like time doing weird things. So like whatever, you take some weird drugs, and it changes your perception of time, or like you're
Or literally, you're just in school and waiting for the bell to ring, and it
yeah,
feels like 10 minutes, but it's actually one.
yeah.
That's what I'm picturing.
So what does that mean? Okay, so I guess your thought. So that's what I mean. Your thought. Okay,
Well, it's the appearance. It's the appearance meme, right? He's saying
well,
that
but
he's saying
but what's appearing? Like nothing's appearing to you when you go. It
no,
feels like it's
you're using the literal word appearance. I'm meaning appearance as in sense data, like your brain's representation of the world in your mind
mhm.
can be false. To when no, as Kant says, it can't be, you can't perceive it falsely because that is your direct perception,
Uh-huh.
but it can read sense data from the real world and can be verified because you can say, hey, it feels like it's been an hour, and they'll be like, dude, it's been like 5 minutes,
Mhm.
right? Oh shit, must have been those mushrooms, right? Like I can verify that my sense data or the appearance
Yeah.
of the world, I'm stretching the word appearance to be just sense data,
Yes. Okay, I
right?
get what you're saying. So that is yeah. Okay, yeah. So you do get the initial like I guess sense possibly I don't know if I'm using that right. You get a sense that time has been a long time or whatever.
Yeah, it appears to be an hour, right? I think is
that's
the
very interesting
appearance.
actually because that's I feel like I do feel like that's coming from your intuition and not from your concepts. Um, but then it's through your concepts that you actually end up correcting this. I don't want to exactly call it a sensation, but the feeling, which so he actually okay. So yes, because then you go, oh, I'm having this sensation, which I guess you could call it. He didn't actually really talk about this much, but like an emotional sensation that it's been a long time, which is peculiar because like a long time is you just kind of start conceptualizing it, but then you go, okay, I have this I I'm making a judgment that like it's been a long time, like it's been an hour, and then I fit it in with the rest of the world, which so I'm not totally out of my mind, but I look at the clock and I go, oh, it's only been 10 minutes. And then that fits in with with your concept of time, not so much with your possibly the sense you have of time, but it does ultimately fit in farther with truth. Oh my God, this is okay. This is a very interesting dude. Time.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Well, because time is not. Hmm. If we were to think about it and weave it even further,
Mm-hmm.
like with the colors, right? Um, I could not go on to like what is it in CSS? It's hex colors or whatever.
Sure.
Hex reference a color, and I couldn't pick out white or eggshell white. Right? I couldn't tell you which number it is, even if I had all the numbers accessible to me.
Uh huh.
Meaning, it's a feeling. It's my intuition that, oh, I see a color and I go, that's eggshell white. And it's probably not because there's so many fucking dumb white colors a house could be painted. I'll see it, and 9 times out of 10, it's not actually eggshell white, but it's the only one that I can reference other than actual white. So the same thing would go with time. I'm mapping time onto, oh, it's been 5 minutes. It's like no one ever says it's been 7 minutes and 15 seconds, right? Because it's not what you feel. You feel in increments of time that you experience that we pick out as being important and referential.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. Okay. The
God, reading Russell made like none of it. I don't think I could have ever pulled that sent like that
I like where you're going with
those
this.
concepts.
Yeah.
It's just Russell gave me so many tools to.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
so excited to continue reading Russell. Like
Mhm.
fuck me, he's so good.
um. Okay. So. Okay. So I guess so. I feel like your sense of time has to come from like experience. So your judgment that it's been about 30 minutes is I want to say it's an empirical one, because you're going, I felt this way about 5 minutes before. I felt that way about 5 minutes before.
And we even amend that, right? Because remember the autist, we kept saying stop mentioning that it's how long till we get there or how long has it been, because we know the more you ask that, the longer it's going to feel like.
Uh-huh.
And that's just a feeling, but it doesn't act. Time doesn't actually extend. It just feels longer because they keep fucking asking, right?
Uh-huh.
It's a weird concept. No pun intended. Like we're telling them it's good. It'll take longer. Like we're literally saying there will be additional time,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
there's no additional time.
It'll take longer if you keep asking. And yeah. So
It's as if we're adding 5 minutes to the trip, or like we're taking detours every time they ask.
so the part about it being about time being objective, like where we can like, I mean, I guess what I can do is I can get a point. I can go, this is blue, and you go like, yeah, it's blue. I understand that. And then I guess when we're talking about time, I guess it's a similar thing. Is that we all have something we can point to and go, yes, this is what's going on, and we can kind of agree on this experience that we're having. Um,
Let me
because
fuck you up for a second. Let me fuck
okay,
you up while you're chewing on that.
okay,
Now, if we live in Alaska, where it's like sunny,
right,
fucking 24 hours a day for 6 months of the year, right? How much does time fucking matter, right? And then, um, time then, what is sun up versus sundown? None of that fucking becomes relevant. It's just the days that pass, right? So it's literally to them up there. I mean, if we were to say that they don't even, if you're a housewife and you don't have to get up or anything like that, you sleep when you're tired and you eat and you don't have any kids, then literally time is irrelevant and disappears,
well,
because
like,
it's like you have nothing to reference other than clocks to tell you that time has passed or your
gotcha.
tiredness.
Okay, I thought you were gonna go if you. I was imagining if you have no clocks and then you were just doing that, like time would get kind of
Yeah.
weird. So
Yeah. I mean, I just brought this up to. That would be if you lived in the world. That would be the only thing that would remind you. And then, so if you take those out, there's literally nothing to tell you other than the feelings you have that are related to things like tiredness and hunger. They would go,
so
well, it's been probably a certain period. Good.
so I feel like I do. So I've thought. So okay, we have fathom. We have. Yeah,
Yes.
we have. we have fathomed the notion of universal time. In a lot of ways.
Atomic time, or no? Is that not the
I
same?
mean, see, that's the weird thing. We're just all gonna agree that like time happens to be working in these ways. I mean, it is convenient, you know. Um,
Like if we're on, well, we can think about this, right? If we're on Venus, there are additional days in the year. The sun is, it goes around in a different amount of minutes. So we would use all of the metrics we have for time would be different.
yeah. So that is an interesting thing that we have a notion, which I mean, I don't know what we have a notion.
But
of
it,
time.
it does tie to real
But
events in the world.
we
They are
do,
not
yes.
independent.
Yeah, we do tie it to things that are going on in the world. To, well, specifically, if you want to talk about appearances, just which are if we're going to use the Kant way of thinking, we tie it to appearances. So like basically, I guess far back in the day before we watches or anything like that, we tied it to the sun. You're just like, where is the sun in the sky? And that's kind of how we were like, at least you like kind of start to approach it like a universal concept of like, of time or whatever.
Just like temperature, right? Freezing water is what the Brits use, or the world, sorry, use. Scientifically measured temperature, right?
Yeah.
Is 0 degrees is freezing, and 100 is boiling, and for Celsius, right?
Yeah.
Sorry.
yes, we're just kind of coming up with we're fathoming a standard. We're just kind of picking a standard out of the things that are kind of that we experience. And I mean, I guess I think nowadays the way that they like figure out time, like so okay. There's also like how discrete can we be about time? So I imagine when we just had the sun, you had to be like, is it in the middle of the sky? Is it like you'd really only? I feel like you'd have like at least during the day you'd have like sunrise, almost midday, which is like a quarter of the way. So halfway, I'm gonna say is it's noon is when it's at the top. So like and then
Sorry,
and then you just have like
go ahead.
then you have like in between halfway and sunset, and then you have sunset. So you only have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times of day, and then like it's just kind of loosely speaking. And then they got the sundial, right? And that was like the next thing, where then they could
Stars.
like well that's nighttime.
Yeah.
Nighttime is it that would be similar, I imagine, where you go like, oh, this star is here. It's at star set or star rise, and then it's or like the moon, whatever. But anyway, you have this object in the sky, and you go like, oh, it's at that position. But then you start getting to like a sundial, and you can go like, oh, well, now we can cut up time into more ways, and we can all talk about it. And they say we can point when the shadow is here. That's when time. That's what this time is, or whatever. And then somewhere between then and now. We now can like somehow or another measure the number of times an atom vibrates in a second, quote unquote, which is kind of a weird way because we had to kind of go, okay, a second is about this much, and then an atom vibrated this many times, which seemed to be like 9 million times, and it was like really like 0.99998799999 seconds what we thought, but now we're just gonna move our notion of a second just a little bit, just to
we literally shoehorn in seconds every whatever it is, leap year.
Now we're just gonna say a second is 9 million atomic vibrations or whatever. It's and I don't know what we're trying to get at. I feel like I'm trying to get it so profound, and I don't know.
We're just kind of exploring the bounds of the concept, right? Or how far? Because right at first you were very apprehensive to even consider appearance beyond anything. I don't know of the visual or what have you, and I kind of expanded that, right?
Well, it was taking time as an appearance because it is a form of appearance. That's I guess something that I want to kind of harp on. Well, at least, but then there's also like how it kind of feels to you. So I guess what happens is that you have the fuck me. Okay, so because you also have a sensation that kind of went along with the time, which is like how you, which was a feeling sensation, not a external one, but a psychological sensation. And then you kind of like pair those two up, which I guess which is the form. So the form of time is a lot weirder to me than space. It's bothering me. And then somehow or another, your sensation fits into time in a certain way, and then it kind of indicates towards a number, which is supposed to be like 10 minutes or 8 minutes, and you kind of. It's mostly the psychological sensation that does the brunt work of that assuming. But then you also have further concept that's go, well, how really long is it? Or how long is it compared to like the way that things in the appearance, how I guess objectively, if you want to say the objects in the world, how long has it been for the objects in the world? And you go like, well, it's not been
like there are literally people around the world, right, that work slave labor 60 to 80 hours a week.
Yeah.
And there are people who work 10, and I would bet my next paycheck, which is long away, that those people report similar amounts of happiness, like even black slaves, because you adjust to the time. It's all relative, right? It feels roughly the same.
Are you saying that they would report the same? Like, how long does time take?
Like, how much am I working, right? Like a spoiled person who only works 10 hours a week, right? You add another 2 hours to that one day they work 10 hours. They're like, fuck, I had to work 12 hours. It was a fucking bitch, right? Or if you have to stay late during the week, right? But, we don't feel it in relations to, well, it's only another 2 hours out of the 40. It's, well, we don't think, wow, I'm not working 80. I'm not a slave, right? Yeah. You only think about, sorry. I'm really expanding this too much.
So, okay. I don't know. I feel like we've just been. How long has this been?
I think we're just masturbating at this point.
Yes. All right. We can keep talking about this. I'm just gonna cut this off though, because this is 2 hours. So
Yeah, we're just
okay.
kind of intellectually masturbating.
Let's keep masturbating.